Hi everybody, this is going to be the tutorial that's going to show you how to make the Emerald Isle Shawl. And I just want to thank everybody who helped me pick the name for this shawl and the person who came up with the idea first. And I just want to thank Helen Verma for her suggestion for the Emerald Isle, and I'll be making sure that she gets a copy sent of the PDF for free. As always, you can find this pattern for free on my site. If you would like to buy the PDF with the pictures, you can find that on either my shop on Etsy or on Raverly. For this pattern, you're going to need a 4mm hook or a size G hook, but for this tutorial I'm going to be using a 5mm hook or a size H hook for the US. The yarn is from Yarn Art from their Flowers line, and it's 1,000 meters. You can find the link and all the information about the yarn on the pattern page on my site or on the PDF. My finished shawl measured 260 centimeters or 102 inches wide and 70 centimeters or 28 inches tall. The gauge was 2 stitches per inch or 2 stitches per 2.5 centimeters. This shawl was made to be a plus size shawl, but as you can see in the pictures with my daughter, who is 11 right now, she can still wear it in all kinds of cool ways. So I hope that you don't let that deter you. Use it for yourself, let your kids use it. It's really nice. Okay, when you first begin, make sure that you leave a little bit of a tail that you can sew in later. So to begin your shawl, you want to begin by chaining 3. And then in that first chain that you did, you want to put 8 double crochets in there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, once you have your 8 double crochets in there, your chain 2 will count as a stitch as well, so you'll have a total of 9 stitches. So for row 2, you want to chain 2 and turn. You want to double crochet into the beginning stitch. The very first stitch of your row, put a double crochet in there. Now your double crochet and your chain 2 counts as 2 stitches in that first stitch. You want to continue and put 2 double crochets in each of your stitches around. And at the end of this row, you should have 18 stitches. I'm just finishing row 2 by putting my 2 double crochets in the top of the ending chain 2. Should have 18 stitches. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Okay, for row 3, you're going to chain 3 and turn. And then working in that very first stitch, you're going to be creating your first V-stitch, so put a double crochet in that very first stitch. And the chain 3 will count as your first double crochet in chain 1. So that's your first V-stitch of your row. Now chain 1, and you're going to be skipping the next stitch, and in the following stitch, you'll put a double crochet and chain 1. You're going to be chaining 1 pretty much after every stitch you do, after every peak stitch too. So in your next, you'll skip your next stitch again, and then the following stitch you'll put another V-stitch. So double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet, and then chain 1. Then you're going to skip your next stitch, and in the following stitch you're going to put a double crochet, chain 1. Then you're going to skip the very next stitch, and then the one after that we're going to be creating our peak stitches. So you skip a stitch, and then the following stitch here should be your center stitch, and your top peak stitches will be 2 double crochets, chain 1, and then 2 double crochets, all worked in that same stitch. And then don't forget, chain 1. Then we're going to repeat what we just did here. Over here we're going to mirror that. So you'll skip the next stitch, and in the following one you'll put 1 double crochet, chain 1. Then you'll skip the next stitch, In the following one, you'll put a V-stitch. You'll put a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet to create your V-stitch, and don't forget to chain 1. Then you're going to skip the next stitch, and then the next you're going to put 1 double crochet, chain 1. And then in this you'll skip a stitch, and in the next stitch you'll put a V-stitch. And then this is the only time you don't chain 1. The very last V-stitch of your row, or peak stitch of your row, you'll just not chain 1. You'll just find that top chain, the ending chain, and put a double crochet in it. Okay, and this is what the end of row 3 looks like. Now for this pattern, there's some tips I want to give you right off the bat. You're always going to be chaining 1 after every stitch you do. So every double crochet will have a chain 1 after. So it'll always be double crochet, chain 1. And after every peak, top peak stitch is what we're calling these for the pattern. When I say top peak or peak stitch, I mean that I want you to do 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, and then chain 1. You'll always be chaining 1 after. And V stitches are going to be the simple double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. So if I say V stitch, this is what I mean. And if I say peak stitch, this is what I mean. Okay, for row 4, we're going to chain 2 and turn. And in your V stitches, this row, I want you to put peak stitches. So 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, chain 1. And then in the next 2 double crochet, the next 2 chain 1 spaces, you're going to be putting a double crochet decrease in each one of those. And how you do that is you yarn over, insert your hook in the stitch, or in the space, sorry, pull up a loop, yarn over, and only pull through 2. Then do that again, yarn over, go back into that same space, pull up a loop, yarn over, only pull through 2. 3 loops on your hook, then you'll yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops, and then chain 1. And you'll repeat that for the next one. Yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop, then pull through 2, yarn over, insert your hook into the same space, only pull through 2, then pull through 3 and chain 1. And that will bring you back up to your V-stitch again. Your V-stitches, this row, will all be worked as peak stitches. So again, we're going to put 2 double crochets, chain 1, and then in the same V-stitch, we're going to put 2 double crochets and chain 1. Then you have 2 more spaces again, 2 more chain 1 spaces, and again you're going to be working that double crochet decrease in both of those chain 1 spaces. Don't forget to chain 1 after. Insert, pull through only 2, yarn over, pull through only 2, and chain 1. Now your top peak stitches in this pattern will always be 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, chain 1. So just keep that in mind. You will always do these the same. And I'll tell you why that's important later. I have a knot in my yarn there. Always. Okay, so the next 2 chain 1 spaces will again be the double crochet decreases. And then again, your V stitches will all be worked like peak stitches. This row. 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, chain 1. Then again, next 2 chain 1 spaces will be double crochet decreases. And then your V-stitch at the end, again, will be worked as a peak stitch. Chain 1, 2 double crochets. Don't chain 1, remember, after the very last peak stitch or V-stitch of your row, You do not chain one at the end. You have to scoot your stitches over to find the top of that chain, and you'll want to put a double crochet in the top of that chain. And that will end row 4. And this is what it looks like at the end of row 4. Okay, for row 5, you'll chain 2 and turn. Now in your first, if you go by this very first one, you know that's your ending double crochet. So then you move over. This is the first 2 double crochets of your peak stitch. There's your chain 1. There's your other 2 double crochets of your V-stitch. You're going to move on over to that peak stitch here, the center stitch, and you'll V-stitch in your peak stitch. When it comes to the ending peak stitches or V-stitches, you're always going to be alternating. So one will be V-stitch, which will go with your double crochet row, and then this will be your peak stitch that will go with your double crochet row. Double crochet decrease, sorry. So you'll have peak stitches, the thicker ones, with your double crochet decrease rows. Everything is much thicker. And then on your off rows where you use V-stitches, you'll be using single double crochets, chain 1. So it's like more of a hollow row. So just remember that they go together. V-stitches go with your double crochets, and your peak stitches will go with your double crochet decreases. Every other row you'll be switching V-stitch, peak stitch, V-stitch, peak stitch. But you'll always have these top peak stitches always be double crochet, 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets. Okay, so after your first V-stitch here, don't forget to chain 1. Then you're going to be putting a double crochet, chain 1 in the next 3 chain 1 spaces. So find the first one here, then you'll double crochet, chain 1. Then your next space here, double crochet, chain 1. Then your third space, double crochet, chain 1. Now we'll come to our peak stitch again, and we're going to be putting a V-stitch in our peak stitch and chain 1. Then again you'll repeat that. You'll be putting 1 double crochet and chain 1 in the next 3 chain 1 spaces. And then in your top peak stitch, you'll always put 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, chain 1. Then again you're going to move on to the next 3 chain 1 spaces, and you're going to put 1 double crochet, chain 1 in those next 3 chain 1 spaces. Now you come to your peak stitch here, and you're going to put a V-stitch in your peak stitch, chain 1. And again you'll be doing a double crochet, chain 1 in the next 3 chain 1 spaces. And then your very last peak stitch will be a V-stitch. So double crochet, chain 1, double crochet on that same stitch. Remember, no need to chain 1 at the very end, just double crochet in the top of your chain 2. And this is what it looks like at the end of row 5. And I believe this is basically, it's a repeat of the last 2 rows, 4 and 5. Every other row, like I said, will have double crochet decreases, and then these will be the double crochets. And every time you have a double crochet row, you're always going to be adding an extra space, so it'll slowly keep growing. Just keep putting your alternating your peak stitches and your V stitches every other row, depending on if you're doing a double crochet row or a double crochet decrease row. Your top peak stitches will always be double crochet, 2 double crochet. And what I did to help myself out here is I got some long tails, and I'll show you how I did that. Okay, I got pretty long tails here, and what I would do as it got bigger and bigger and bigger, I would get on either side. So it sounds like somebody's drilling across the hall. I'd get on either side of my peak stitch, and I would place a marker, one of these long markers on here, kind of loose, it doesn't have to be tight. And then in the stitch right below it, I just pull one of those tails through, and then you can kind of pull both sides to tighten. That way I'd have this part, this part of the shawl would have this marker, and then when I flip the other side, it would also have a marker already there for me. And I would do it on both sides, but you don't have to. It's just a reminder when you get to this part that you need to, and I just keep moving it up as I went. And I have my shawl here. I want to show you. This is the center row. See how they're all peak stitches? And then the ones in between, get to what color you can see here. Oh, I'll just go this way. Here you'll see, let me get a little closer. Every other row, one is going to be peak stitch, and then the next one will be a V-stitch, then peak stitch, then V-stitch. That's how all those are going to go on the second and the very last of your rows. So you'll see this is the ending. It's also peak stitch, V-stitch, peak stitch, V-stitch. It's alternating. The only one that doesn't alternate is the very top middle. And as you can see, let me back up just slightly. This row will be the double crochet decrease followed by double crochet rows. So just think hollow. You know, double crochets are going to be the more hollow row, and those are the ones you'll be doing your V-stitches on. And you don't need to worry about counting or anything. As long as you are putting your double crochets in the chain one spaces of the double crochets that you did the time before, you'll always be increasing one in between your peak stitches. So between this peak stitch section and the very end of the row here, it just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. And I've almost got it done. It gets dark here right on the end, and I'll make sure I share pictures and whatnot. But I wanted to make sure that I get this filmed before the weekend so that you guys won't have to wait like last time. So anyway, so regardless of the repeat already being here, I'm going to go ahead and do a few more rows for you because I'm still doing my shawl right now, so I have it very much in my head. So I'm going to run you through a few more rows of it. So for row 6, we did our V-stitch and our double crochets the previous row. So you're always going to chain 2 from now on. You'll always chain 2 and turn. And the only difference is of the start of the row is if there's a V-stitch here or a peak stitch here. If there's a V-stitch, then you put a peak stitch. So you're going to put 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets, chain 1. And then in all of your chain 1 spaces, which now you can see there's one more now, 1, 2, 3, 4. Last time there were 3. So in the next 4 chain 1 spaces, you'll be doing your double crochet decrease. So again, you'll yarn over, only pull through 2. Do that again, pull through all 3, chain 1. Again, yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through 2. Do that again, pull through 3, chain 1. Keep doing this until you reach your V-stitch or your peak stitch. Whatever it is, you'll always just kind of mindlessly go about it. And then when you reach your next V-stitch, you'll put a peak stitch. So double crochet 2, chain 1, double crochet 2, chain 1. Now again, you have 4 chain 1 spaces. So in the next chain 4 spaces, you'll be putting your double crochet decreases. And don't forget to keep chaining 1 at the end. Then I see by our marker we're getting close to the peak stitch. And remember, your peak stitches are always done the same. So you'll be putting your 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, chain 1. Then again in your next 4 chain 1 spaces, you're going to be putting your double crochet decreases in there, your peak stitch and your V-stitch, and then you'll continue all the way to the end where you put your peak stitch here. No need to chain 1 at the end, and then just double crochet in the ending chain 2. Okay, I just finished the peak stitch here on the end. I didn't chain 1. I'm just going to find that top chain of my chain 2 to double crochet in, and then that will end row 6, which is a repeat of row 4. So the repeat of row 5 now we're going to be doing for row 7, and again you'll always chain 2 and turn. Now we have our peak stitch, so we're going to be working V-stitch in there. Chain 1. Then you're going to be putting 1 double crochet, chain 1 in all your spaces up to your next peak stitch. And since it was 4 last row, it should be 5 this row, because it'll increase by 1 every time. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6. Ooh, oops, it's because I messed up right there. Right there on the end. So I got done with my last peak stitch on the end. You don't have to chain 1 on the last one. Just find that top of the chain 2 and double crochet to end row 6, which is the repeat of row 4. So now we're going to be doing the repeat of row 5, which is going to be row 7 for us. I'm just going to keep repeating rows 4 and 5. So this is the repeat of row 5. So for row 7 you're going to chain 2 as always and turn. Now we're going to be working in our peak stitches will now become V stitches this row, chain 1, and now we're going to be careful not to get in between the 2 double crochets for your peak stitch there. Make sure you come over and you find your next your actual space between your peak stitch and your first double crochet decrease, and you'll put a double crochet, chain 1 in that space. And then continue to put a double crochet, chain 1 in all your chain 1 spaces until you reach your next peak. And since it increases by 1 and it was 4 last row, we should have 5 this row. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces in between our 2 increases here. So we did a peak stitch last row. This row we're doing V stitches, chain 1, and again move past your peak stitch and into the actual stitch between your peak stitch and your, that's the only thing you really need to watch out for. And once you get your double crochet chain 1s and all your chain 1 spaces, and you make it back up to your top peak stitch, I can see I've marked here to remind myself, and I want to put 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets, chain 1. Then we're going to repeat it on this side, putting our double crochet, chain 1 in our chain 1 spaces. Should be 5 this row. And that brings us back up to our, I'm running out of yarn here, it brings us back up to our peak stitches. So again, V stitch in your peak stitches, then chain 1, double crochet and chain 1 in all your chain 1 spaces till you get to the very end of your row, where you will put a V stitch here. No need to chain 1, just double crochet in the top of your chain 2 from last row. And that will be what it will look like, and it'll continue to grow on its own. If you find difficulty in finding your peak stitches, then feel free to mark those with another color if you need. Well, that's it, guys. I really hope you liked this tutorial and pattern. If you did, please don't forget to like and share this video. It helps me out so much. Also, if you want to always be notified whenever I release a new video, you can go to my main YouTube page and click that little bell button next to the subscribe button to always be notified whenever I release a new video. Also, I have 2 groups on Facebook called Crochet Zone Public and Crochet for the Masses. Crochet Zone Public is a place you can share anything on. Even the designers will go there and share their stuff. But if you are looking more for a secret kind of group, then I recommend checking out Crochet for the Masses. Also, I have a Pinterest community board where designers will come there and pin their newest designs or older designs, but it's all free direct pattern links. So you can go there and hopefully find what you're looking for your next project. Also, now I have a newsletter that I post everything that has come out from me for that week, and I put it in a newsletter and mail it to you once a week. So if you haven't done that yet, please go to my site, or there's a link down below the video. Click on to sign up for the email. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching.